This is Canon Fodder, episode 19. My guest this week needs very little introduction. He is he's one of two of the premier literary podcasters in this sphere. Mr. Kevin Kautzman is the co-host of the Art of Darkness podcast. He is a playwright. He is a Twitter shitposter and terminally online kind of guy. And he's holding something in his hand. What do you got there, Kevin?
This is Saint Genesius, my patron saint. Are you familiar with Saint Genesius?
I am not.
Mr. Hudson? He stood up to the Emperor Diocletian, who was rather rabidly anti-Christian. The story is very amusing. He was commissioned to basically be a shit poster for the emperor, and so he went underground and embedded himself with the Christians in order to learn about their rituals. I suppose I say our rituals. And he was baptized, but he didn't believe it. And then he staged a play for the emperor, mocking the baptism and mocking Christianity. And during the performance, he had a miraculous conversion and beseeched the emperor to see the folly of his ways and to convert. And I believe he was beheaded because he would relent. So that's the energy that's just what I'm bringing to this podcast today.
Wonderful. Well, and it's funny because for the listener out there, we are discussing Herman Hesse's Demian, which I'd not heard of Demian. We were kind of talking, before the show about what reached the Anglosphere from Hesse's oeuvre, and that's Steppenwolf, that's Siddhartha. And I consider myself kind of a well-read guy, as I'm sure you do as well. And this one just completely I was filtered. Let's say, like I did not get to Hesse, or at least his deep cuts. You obviously did, because you did a whole episode on him, and I guess we can consider this sort of a coda or an addendum to Art of Darkness. I always try and make sure to mention that this is not Art of Darkness, that we are trying to stay to the text, and I wouldn't dare step on your guys' toes, because I really respect what you guys are doing, and I'm a big fan. So obviously.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, and there's no toe stepping. I mean, we have our shtick and our kind of angle. We do biographical profiles of dead artists. They need to be dead a year and a day before we'll cover them. We're getting ready to do Cormac this year. That's going to be really heavy. And Hesse was somebody I'd wanted to do. I mean, from jump, we're in our fourth year, our fourth season. I'm almost like a Hesse completist, kind of as much as he can be in terms of the novels and the short stories. But he was a scriptophile. He wrote tons of letters. I can't remember the exact page count, but like even, in the sort of latter half of his life, his correspondence alone would be dozens of pages a day. I mean, he's one of the most, of all the subjects we've covered, he's one of the most natural writers. And it's interesting because I sort of think of Demian as core Hesse. I think in America, he had a renaissance in the 60s and the 70s, and that kind of actually made its way back over to Europe because he wasn't read for a period of time. And he was never read with like the sort of, well, that's not true, but he was very, very popular for a couple of periods in his life. His first novel made him a household name. Then again, when he wrote Demian under a pseudonym, Emil Sinclair, through World War I, everybody read it. It was hugely popular. And it's so interesting that then in the US picked him up. They discovered him kind of through Timothy Leary, and that set kind of through the Beats found him. And they say that one of the reasons for his popularity in English has to do with the way the translations came out. The translations are a little more in English are a little more everyman, whereas apparently auf Deutsch, the style's a little, maybe a little stuffier than it comes across in English because of the differences between the two languages. His like class comes across really clearly in the original German is what I read. But I think, in the 60s and the 70s, you mentioned this in the green room, let's say, that it was Steppenwolf and Siddhartha. I mean, it feels like everybody reads Siddhartha at some point.
Right,
One, because it's so easy to read, but it's also kind of iconic. And then the hippies picked that up, and Timmy Leary named his retreat in upstate New York after the school, the kind of academy in the glass bead game. You familiar with the glass bead game?
I'm not. Please inform me.
Well, yeah. So I mean, the glass bead game is or Magister Ludi is the kind of magnum opus. It's the big book that he wrote. It's like the last novel, and it's set. And I'm trying to look up it's set in a fictional province of Europe called Castalia, and it's about a fellow who revolutionizes something called the glass bead game, which is a metaphorical game. I mean, it's real in that world, but it's essentially a game of dialectics where people will play the game together. One person will bring, I don't know, a poem from Schiller or a line from a Schiller poem. Let's say the poem that Beethoven used. Somebody will bring that, right? And then someone else will bring a mathematical formula, and they'll set them on the table, and they'll reconfigure both of them into something new and evolve. And it's pan-disciplinary, very conceptual, very high-minded, but it's sort of this beautiful novel about learning and about memetics and high culture and European culture. And it's just the kind of thing that if you're struggling as a young person let's say in the liberal arts, and you're trying to understand maybe why you're doing it, this would be a good book to read. But not necessarily the entry point into Hesse. I mean, I would say if you want to get into Hesse, the books to read are probably Demian, Siddhartha, and Steppenwolf.
Right.
Yeah.
These damn Germans and their dialectics. I mean, it's
we're krautmaxing on the pod. Yeah.
Krautmaxing with Kautmaxing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you are an out and devout Catholic, right? I'm not telling stories out of school, right?
No, I am a practicing Catholic. I mean, I'm a poor Catholic. There's stuff that I'm working through. I was only confirmed last year. I should have been confirmed when I was a teenager, but I was a rebellious little bastard. And but I came around to it, and my children have been baptized, and we're expecting. We're finding out the sex. Thank you. We're actually finding out the sex of the new baby tomorrow.
Wonderful.
There may be a little sabbatical from Art of Darkness. If we go dark for a few weeks in April/May, y'all know why. Yeah, really excited. And yeah, the children are baptized, and yeah, I am practicing. I do my best, and I'm trying to do some things for Lent that I won't disclose. But yeah, I take it seriously.
And the only reason I bring it up is because Demian is a Gnostic novel or Gnostic novella. It's a pamphlet almost. It's a very short book, but it dives into Gnosticism. It dives into duality. It dives deeply into Carl Jung, and reading it, I'm thinking, well, why the hell did Kautzman have me read this? Like it seemed not heretical or anything, because it is literature, but very much like when I read these recommendations that friends give me, I try to learn a little bit more about who they are. Why would they recommend this, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally it's a high-minded coming-of-age novel about somebody seeking the truth. And it's deeply informed by Nietzsche, deeply informed by Jung. Hesse was in Jungian analysis for a time and actually corresponded with Jung, had a couple of letters back and forth. I think Jung figured out who he was because he wrote this under a pseudonym. And I think Jung wrote him and said, I discovered you. I discovered your little ploy, right? Because it only came out later that it was Hesse who had written this. I mean, and when I first got exposed to Hesse, I was in university, like so many people, and studying history and philosophy, and actually working at a used bookstore that had like a Jung specialty. Like this kind of thing was a big part of that, the identity of that store. So I think this is one of the novels that shouldn't fall through the cracks. I think our young guys and gals should be exposed to Hesse. I think he gives insights into a very particular kind of pan-European identity. It might be a little squishy for certain people, but it kind of shows the other side of the Nietzschean and the Faustian European man trying to survive psychologically and spiritually in the face of industrialization, and then the great wars, the brother wars, that so devastated Europe, in which we're still living in sort of the post-apocalypse of those horrific wars that killed so many people like Hesse and so many of his peers, kind of over, certainly in World War I, kind of over nothing. So for anybody who's a seeker, I mean, and I think you could be a practicing Catholic and be a seeker, and I think any number of our priests would probably agree, and you probably should be seeking, and it's a practice. So yeah. And I think it's a great novel, and I think he's just such an inviting author. He was a Nobel Prize winner. I think people tend to dismiss him a little bit as something you read as a teen or at university and then put away. But boy, I mean, the body of work is so fascinating, and his biography is so interesting too. I talked about it ad nauseum on the Art of Darkness episode. If you want to go listen, it's at artofdarkpod.com. Thanks for having me on, by the way. I love the invitation to talk about, literature, man.
So most definitely. And it's funny. The guest that I had previous to you was Paul Fahrenheit, and he was telling me that he thinks that humanity is kind of moving away from literacy and back to pictographs. And I was like, oh no, you've just killed my whole podcast and like a bunch of other podcasts, because people just aren't reading anymore. But we are a podcast for aristocrats, or as everybody's favorite philosopher Evola would say, we are aristocrats of the soul. And well, okay. So one funny thing about Demian that you were mentioning is that it is an aristocratic novel. He's a young man. Sinclair is a young man who comes from means. You could almost in the mold of sort of like a Thomas Mann, even moderately wealthy family, very sheltered life, and he's brought out into the world in like the worst way, actually, right? He meets a street tough, right, that he gets involved with for no reason other than because he's a kid. They end up, he tries to create some bona fides for himself, which ends up getting him in trouble and indebted to Cromer. Cromer's his name, right?
Yeah, Franz Cromer.
And this sets Sinclair up really for the rest of his life, because it's not only the catalyst to his interest in Demian as a person, but also it sets up Demian as this sort of almost supernatural figure. Please speak on this.
Right. I mean, the novel's fundamentally about duality, and this is something that obsessed Hesse was this idea of the kind of the overworld, the world of light, and then the world of shadow, and that remains perennially germane. I mean, you have I think we all have this experience of sort of living with you might call it the longhouse, but sort of it's not always the longhouse, but just sort of the warmth of domesticity, the relatives and family, and the Germans would say Gemütlichkeit, just the hominess, right? And maybe church and potentially even school at times, just that warm world, and then the darker world of crime and fraud and drugs and sex and meanness that every young person has to confront when you're coming of age, if you're at all serious. And Hesse struggled with that mightily as an adolescent. He was like the textbook sensitive young man. I mean, he was like even his schoolmasters described him as like an open nerve. He very nearly was marked insane. Like he was sent to an asylum, but the doctors were like, we don't think he's crazy. Like, I think he can be saved.
He's
but, I mean,
just weird.
He's right. And one wonders what he would be like today. Like, what sort of a non would Hesse be like in his teens and 20s? But yeah, that's fundamentally what the novel's about. And so you have a lot of duality in the novel. And you mentioned Franz Kromer, and then his sort of antidote is Max Demian, who is something like a figment of Hesse's or Sinclair's psyche. He's his daemon, his kind of like. I mean, I have the definition of it. It comes from ancient Greek. It means God, godlike, power, fate. Originally referred to a lesser deity or guiding spirit, such as the daemons of ancient Greek religion, right? So he meets in a way, I mean, I don't want to conflate these things, but sort of meets his higher guardian angel. He meets this spirit that drives him ultimately to like an alchemical sort of transformation.
Yeah, through the process of becoming, yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. And this is very
it's very much a Bildungsroman, like, but in a more spiritual sense. Mm-hmm. It's the essence of becoming.
Right. It isn't like a lot of contemporary literature where this stuff would never be discussed or stated in the novel. Like this would be laughed out of most, MFA writing workshops. It's just totally anachronistic and bizarre. This kind of concern for the inner spiritual life. It's like, well, what happens? Well, not that much. I mean, if you're looking for pure plot, I mean, but wonderful if you're the kind of person, if you're like I am, where you're looking for these kind of like, it's like how Twin Peaks handles it, where, you'll see a character and you go, is that character real? Well, it's real to this character. So it's real in that sense, but is it flesh and bones real? Like, right. No, but does that matter? It's all a movie. It's all a television
exactly.
series.
It's like, what is real? Like it very much tackles, and I think you also did an episode on who's the playwright? The Irish guy. His name is escaping me right now.
Oscar Wilde?
No, not Oscar Wilde. Beckett. Yes, Beckett, who is very, very much of the same. I had a tweet a while back of like something about this phenotype of Irish tells you something about the world. It's him and David Lynch, because they look very similar, those two, and they're it's like they gaze into an abyss and bring out easily digestible truths, but they have to obscure it in a way as not to melt anyone's brains.
Right. And didn't Freud say that the Irish were the only people impervious to psychoanalysis?
Yeah, I think he did say that, which is accurate.
Yeah. That's not that's more about what psychoanalysis is than
exactly
what the Irish are. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think everybody can relate to that. I was turned on in the Art of Darkness chat at Telegram. We have a Telegram chat. I hope you don't mind if I plug it. It's
plug away. I'm going to put all the links in the description. Everybody's going to, the 5 people that watch this are going to know all about you guys if they don't.
Oh, already. Well, listen, you never know. I mean, it takes a while to get a podcast to have some traction. You have to just stay on it. I mean, we could have quit doing Art of Darkness after 6 months, 8 months, and I'm glad we didn't. It takes time. Anyway, it's at t.me/artofdarkpod, and somebody in the chat, the name escapes me off the cuff. There's so many names.
Was it Kira?
No, it was somebody recommended. I'll look it up. Try to look it up in the background. Somebody recommended The Empty Man. Are you familiar with this kind of new cult film that's
I am not,
been going around? Well, I don't want to give any of it away. It came out during the pandemic and kind of bombed and was critically I mean, it was just sort of treated as like a mid movie. Like, okay, what is this? And now people have discovered it, and it's become a cult classic. It's becoming a cult classic. I only watched it the one time, but I'm trying to think about how to do this without spoiling anything. But you're familiar with the idea of a tulpa?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and that film has me thinking about like film itself as a tulpa, like cinema, and then also like our interactions with one another on the internet. Like, am I really? I mean, now more than ever, I'm interacting with the real T.R. Hudson,
for now,
and yet, sorry.
For now.
Yeah, right. As far as I know. Do you know what I mean? But it's like we're all sort of projections, in everyone else's mind. Like, especially if all you know, somebody you have a mutual and oomphy on Twitter, you've known for years. What have you known? Do you know? Like that?
Oh, totally. Yes. It's
So
it was, I think it was my discussion with Zero HP Lovecraft where we kind of touched on this. Like, there's a presenting face that everybody has, right, on the internet, especially if you're trying to do OPSEC, right? You are giving very little details about who you actually are, and in some ways you're only putting out an idea, right? And whether, like, there's some guys that take this to the max where like their entire account is just the idea, right? I think about what's that the traffic cone, right? He'll just go into threads and just say traffic cone here if you need assistance whenever it's a really popular thread. Or my buddy Norm Cruz, who his whole shtick is that he just does Norm Macdonald jokes, and he'll just get into people's mentions and just quote Norm, like
that's all you need.
Exactly. I don't know who this guy is. He could be anybody, but he's Norm to me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and,
right.
I think, and actually, you get more popular and you get more likes and follows and retweets and whatever, or reposts now. I think it is, right? Because we're no longer Twitter, we're X. We're grown up and responsible. But if the more gimmicky you are, the better you do. People can't handle more than two dimensions in some respects.
It's one especially of the worst things about that platform is that it's like the best and the worst thing about that platform at the same time. If I could come back as an anon, I might do, but Brad and I, my co-host on Art of Darkness, we're both doxed and out there. I think there's room for both sides, but I am a firm defender of the anons. I mean, if the anons can just keep throwing bricks at the Overton window, and also just objectively some of the funniest human beings who've ever lived, truly hilarious. And if you can't like laugh during this time in the foul year of our Lord 2024, we say in Art of Darkness all the time, we laugh so we don't cry. So yeah, I'm a big anon respecter.
I want to shift somewhat to Carl Jung, because we touched on him a little bit, and you actually did an episode on The Good Doctor, if I remember correctly. Yes,
we have not done.
No, it was
yet. You mean Timmy Leary?
Yeah, it was O'Leary. Yeah, never mind. But
yeah, friend of the show, Timmy Leary.
I'm guessing that you know a little bit about Jung, because and when I say that I know a little bit about Jung, I mean I know The Shadow. I've read Answer to Job. Synchronicities. I know about I know his buzzwords. I know very little. So if you could teach me about Jung and maybe the audience, I think that'd be good to learn and also good for understanding the novel.
Yeah,
briefly. You don't have to go through the whole spiel.
Totally. I mean, and I haven't brushed up on Jung in quite some time, but I can sort of try to fundamentally explain what he was. He was one of the principal students of Freud. He was Swiss. He was, I believe, he was Christian. I can't remember what denomination.
He was a very odd strain. Whatever he was baptized, he sort of morphed into his own thing.
Absolutely.
Later on. I guess you could call him a non-denominational Christian later in life, but
sure,
but you wouldn't see him at a megachurch, like
right. Or you might, and he'd pay pay attention to it. But he was kind of critical in Freud's inner circle because of course psychoanalysis is overwhelmingly Jewish in its origins. I mean, Freud, his patients, that place, Vienna at that time. So it was important for Freud to have this major sort of Christian, disciple. And they eventually broke over sort of disagreements about things. And Jung went very, very heavily in the direction of myth and poetics and aesthetics. And he conceived of the idea, or at least sort of like, made popular the idea of the collective unconscious.
Right.
This idea that there's a shared well of collective experience and archetypes from which, we all kind of draw in our life's experience. Jung is fundamentally more honest than Freud. Freud was, and this is very layperson, I'm not a scholar of these guys, but I have my opinions. Freud was pretty dishonest about all this idea of like sort of clinical practice and wrapping all this stuff up in this kind of scientific language, is profoundly pseudoscientific. But does it work for people? It seems to. There's some benefit
Maybe.
to just,
I think I won't, get too much into it, but I went to therapy for a while and whatever. And I found it very unhelpful. I found it actively harmful in some ways.
Right. I mean,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to suck up all the air in the room, but yeah, I would say that it's I think that trying to understand the human mind is a noble endeavor, but because it's almost like there's no possible way to have an objective standard of measurement outside of something like even neuroscience is a little iffy,
neuroscience is super fake.
I mean, just the discovery of like epigenetics is like, okay, what do you do with that? Like it both answers the blank slate and the nature versus nurture sort of arguments, but then also doesn't. It's very wishy-washy, right? And again, we are very lay people when it comes to this. So if anybody out there has comments,
that's what podcasts are for, man. We're just BSing. Give just hot take after hot take.
But yes, I think that there is I guess the word is utility to trying to understand the human mind, but it gets very culty very quickly because people don't know who they are and desperately want to. And I think part of Freud's power was telling rich aristocrats in Vienna who they were.
100%.
And I think actually the Jung Freud division ended up, I think they were in America. And this could be apocryphal, but Freud was like, it's all about sex. It's all about sex. And Freud was like, I don't know about that, and it ended up,
Jung. Mm-hmm.
It ended up being the thing that broke them up. They were like mid lecture tour or something like this, where it finally came to blows. Again, this is third hand knowledge that I'm spitting right now. So
yeah, I don't
feel
know
free
if
to
that
fact check
happened.
me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it looks like this may have happened. I'm reading about it. He was at Fordham. Jung was in the U.S. and he gave a 6-week series, which was finally republished as Symbols of Transformation. Well, they contained remarks on Jung's dissenting view on the libido. They represent largely a psychoanalytical Jung, for which he became famous in the following decades. Nonetheless, it was their publication which Jung declared cost me my friendship with Freud. So yeah, they disagreed over the primacy of sex in terms of, I guess, the psyche and human life and human nature, probably because Jung was looking for something less materialistic.
And which,
Freud is,
I won't say that because it could get very controversial very quickly. and this is a non-controversial good boy show in some respects.
Yeah,
so
sure.
But I want to. So Carl Jung, I think you have to have a basic understanding of him to sort of get this book, even if it's just the cursory, like the shadow, the collective unconscious, and the process of what's that one word they use? It basically just the process of becoming an adult,
Right.
more or less, right? Am I missing anything here?
Well, and I would say in the anima and the
Yes,
animus, the sort of the anima is the female portion of the male psyche. The animus is the male portion of the female psyche. In terms of, and Jung was deeply influenced by alchemy and read alchemy as a system of self-actualization. He read it as a psychological, philosophical system, not literally. As we're really trying to make lead into gold. It's more a metaphor for again, for this self-actualization, this becoming, an actual person instead of an NPC or whatever you want to say. Yeah, so it's all in there. I mean, instead of the id, you have the shadow. And the shadow work is a big part of Jung's psychology. The idea that you have to confront your dark side.
Everybody who's thing that bothers you. Yeah. What I've heard it tell as, sorry, no, go ahead. No, you're the,
no, I want to hear no, after you.
I've heard it tell that it's, if you see something about somebody that bothers you, it's confronting that within yourself. Like, I think Kautzman is always interrupting people, but it's actually Hudson who is constantly the interrupter.
It's so interesting too, because both can be true. You have to, and I do think part of maturing is realizing that. And then also there's a level where you realize, you have to realize that other people are not always operating at the same level of awareness as you are. They might be having a bad day and living inside a hall of mirrors of projection, right? So you have to, I think a lot of grace can come out of this, like forgiveness can come out of this. And just understanding that we're all on the same sinking ship. So you need to have compassion for one another, even for your sworn enemy. And then you can get into sort of Christian psychology and brotherly love, agape, and all the rest of it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there, throughout the novel, you have Sinclair's wrestling with Christianity, whether it's Demian telling him, trying to give him secret knowledge a la the Gnostics, right? Whether it's the idea that I think Jehovah is one of the many faces of God, and that there's also, Abraxas, who is sort of this other Middle Eastern deity. I have a page open on Abraxas.
Yeah. Think about,
He's the I guess the evil side of God, let's say. Like, was it you would know as a Catholic, was it Clement who postulated that Jesus and the Antichrist were two sides of the same coin created by God? It might have not been Clement. It was some Catholic philosopher at some point, like, who was later
heresy.
Yes, yeah, total heresy that was later sort of.
Why would I know about this, T.R. Hudson?
I don't know. I think, a Catholic guy. He means
that's one of the beautiful things about just saying I'm a Catholic is you're like, nope, that's heresy.
Exactly.
Not my beat. No, but the Gnostic heresy and Gnosticism is fascinating and has influenced so many different artists. I mean, you have Santana Abraxas, and you have the album, and A Serious Man, the great Coen Brothers film. I don't want Abraxas. I never ordered Abraxas. And they know what they're doing there. They know what they're pointing toward. Yeah. So
it's funny. I have to rewatch now because I saw it years and years ago and didn't put that together.
Oh yeah. Well, fun fact: the and I sometimes post about this on my extremely heterodox Twitter account that is not just one note. The cafe that I go to over here in St. Paul, Minnesota, near St. Paul, Minnesota, is where they shot the cafe scene in A Serious Man. So every time I go in there, I think about the Cuck. I call it the Cuck Cafe because it's where he
where what's his name, Max something,
Yeah.
or not, yeah, he's like
yeah,
he's telling him he's got to move out, that it'd be
Mhm.
best for the children if you found this
Mhm.
hotel, that
Yep.
your wife is leaving you.
Yep.
I'm a serious man. I am seriously fucking your wife.
Yep. So you'll see me on X, on Twitter, sometimes posting, here's my my lunch at the Cuck Cafe. Great cafe.
Highly recommend it. Don't
Highly
bring your wife.
Oh man, that's pure Minnesota, pure Americana over there, man. We're holding it down. You get a bad reputation up here, but there's still light in the darkness out here.
So in the Telegram group chat, you also mentioned you want to talk about True Detective. And I was interested to see what connections you were going to make with that.
Oh, that was more just like, that's what's on my mind right now because
I see.
TD4
Okay.
is such a horrific abortion. I mean, just terrible. I had a real uneasy evening last night because I'm very interested in this idea lately, and we can weave this back into Demian.
I'm
We'll
sure you
play
can. You're a smart guy. Do it.
Well, let's play the glass speed game here together, TR Hudson. So are you familiar with this concept of dead internet theory?
Yes.
I bet you are. Yeah.
Yes.
For
I
those who
am dead internet. I am just an algorithm that you're talking to right now.
Well, if you had to describe dead internet theory to someone who doesn't know what it is, how would you do it?
So basically, nobody's on the internet. That everything is an ad based on an algorithm based on another ad, sort of weaving together over and over again, and that all the interactions that you see online, 99% of them, and that's, I don't know how, whatever percentage of them, let's say, are completely autonomous, are just done without thought. And you could even say that if 99% of all internet traffic is done by bots, let's say even the 1% that is quote unquote done by humans, even 99% of that is just completely bots, and bots trying to be people, let's say, because most traffic on the internet is, requests by whoever, whatever, grabbing this, getting that, installing this. It's like, it's all background noise. The 1% of actual traffic is actually itself 99% automated, let's say.
Right. Well, and this was a big part of the discussion around Musk's acquisition of Twitter. How much of this is real? How much of this is fake? I think dead internet theory is sort of your worst paranoid, delusional nightmare of what the internet is, right? You're trapped in your own algorithmic hall of mirrors, and most of what you're consuming online is fake. On social media, et cetera, et cetera. And even if only like 20% of it is fake, that's still deeply unnerving to consider, because everything interacts in that same, it's like if somebody pisses in the pool. It's like, yeah, the whole pool isn't piss, but if 20% of it is piss, I don't want to be in that pool.
Yeah.
So
the pool of Theseus. Or Theseus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's very funny. So I was thinking about this last night because TD for the season ended, and I went back and I had watched 1, I had watched 2. My better half was kind of into 4, but then like we started watching 1, and she's like, "Oh yeah, 4 is terrible compared to 1." And then we kept watching it. She's like, "This is terrible." And last night, because of course it's all about like only white men, only straight white men are shitting on TD4, and it's like you're watching these comments roll in after the finale happened. All, like, not all, but the majority of the critics are all about it. Like Rolling Stone said it's the best finale of the franchise so far.
Well, of course, we knew that was going to happen,
Sure. Right. And all of the critical stuff, okay, bought and paid for. They've got a curry favor with HBO. It's a little cult out there. They might as well be Scientologists. I actually have more respect for Scientologists because they know what they are. This is like this weird little careerist cult out in LA. running on fumes as that industry just dies and goes away forever. Think, in Salah. But it's the comments that got me last night. I made the mistake, Hudson. I made the mistake of reading the comments. Like I went
do
in
it
and
all the time.
Dude, I started reading the threads, and it was like obvious bot, troll, shill, and some of the talking points were like they used the phrase "stuck the landing" a lot. You would see that phrase multiple times. Yeah,
it's almost like the media too. Whereas as soon as they have that hook, as soon as they have this is the talking point, it's what you're going to get. What was it? A perfect example of recently, Madam Web came out, which is like a horrible movie. And they were talking about how grounded it is, and just everything grounded. She's a female superhero. She's grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Or even something topical in the news. I don't really watch much news, but as soon as Trump does something, they figure out what it is, and then they call it. Perfect example in Florida, the "Don't Say Gay" bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
The word "gay" isn't mentioned in it at all, but as soon as the meme, let's say, because is contrary to popular belief, the left can meme, they just do it in Congress and not on X.
Well, and they do it through pharmaceutical companies. We can tie this all the way back to Freud and therefore Demian. One of their key ways of, in their playbook, because this is all neurolinguistic programming, which emerges out of Freudian thinking, and then also Bernays and public relations and all the rest of it. The playbook of this side, whatever this side is, call it whatever you want, call it capital R regime, I don't know. They love to use pee pee poo poo. You remember what the big thing was when the plague started kicking off? It was toilet paper. Everybody's got to worry about toilet paper. Panic about toilet paper. Well, they do that because you got to wipe your ass every day. It's one of the most intimate, awkward things. And if they basically just lower our psychological valence all the way down into the gutter. It's the same thing with the Trump P tape. So now every time you're taking a piss, like subconsciously you're thinking they're
did he
dark.
Do that in that hotel? That's what you're thinking. Like it's like.
It's like, ooh, it's icky, and ooh, it's dirty, and that's pure
the
Bernays mind control.
Yeah.
And it's literally just like wizards of the light, dark, hiding in the shadows as anons, and then weirdos like me battling these dark, satanic wizards who use language to manipulate the message. I get real paranoid about this stuff, man. I can put on a tinfoil hat with anybody. Like, why is it 6 feet of social distance? Well, when you think about six is a special number for them. Let's just say that. And then like you think 6 feet under.
You think grave,
yeah. It's 6 feet tall is exactly what she'll swipe on Tinder, and then 6 feet under is where we're going to all end up. So it's 6 feet of social distance, because this is science, obviously. Don't get me started. But this is all.
No, please, I'm getting you started. Do it.
There you go. So we're talking about TD4, and I'm reading this, and I'm just totally started to get that like paranoid, queasy feeling of like, oh my God. And I would love to know, and we'll never know. I would love to know. Well, here we go. How much Max, our friend Max, like Max Demian, I would love to know how much HBO, how much that company spent to polish that turd at the drop, and like, what is real anymore? Like, what, nobody truly thinks that finale was better than anything season 1 did. I mean, it's barely the same show. It should not be considered True Detective. I mean, it's really just, if you just called it Night Country and Jodie Foster was in it, you'd just be like, okay, this is like not that great of a show.
People would just say, oh, this is a True Detective ripoff,
right.
Or, it's funny. I bet that somebody would say, why didn't they just make this True Detective? Like,
as far as I can tell, I mean, it feels like an idea that they labeled True Detective somehow to get it greenlit, or I don't even know. It feels like another idea that they jammed in. The other I wanted to say about the bots and the other 2 talking points that just told me that this is just bullshit. They were talking about like right away when it dropped. It's like somebody posting, just give Jodie Foster the Emmy now. Like that was like any real human being posts that or thinks that. Nobody thinks that or says that. It's just garbage. Then the other one, which was such a huge tell, was, oh, I could watch another season with, Foster and the other actor. Give us another. I'm like, do you know how True Detective works? Like, whoever's running these paid accounts didn't even get the memo. Like, that's not how it's not how True Detective works. It was just, oh man, it was so uncanny and unnerving. And I guess this is just sort of like talking about how when you read Demian, because it's before the internet, it's before telecommunications, maybe they had the radio at the time. It's not as unrealistic and a description of what our lives really are now, because now we live inside this sort of strange hall of mirrors, where what we interact with on a day-to-day basis, if we're very online, and even if we're not, but especially if we're very online, is a large portion of it is fabricated, and a projection of our own sort of psychic space. So in any case, there you go.
It's even scarier when you see it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends, and we could talk about this offline, but I have friends who, I'll talk to them on the telephone even, and they'll say, oh man, this war in Ukraine and they'll just rattle off everything that they heard on TV or everything they heard on, Pod Save America or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, just every talking point that they've been handed. And in some ways I do the same thing, because I get my dissident right talking points, and I say, oh, well, did you know that chimp in captivity jerk off, but chimp in wild did not? What mean? Like,
yeah, but that's real science.
Well, yeah, so, no, that's objective. He studied.
True. Yeah, right. He studied the chimps at the zoo.
You got to study for that. But no, it's.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to have that self-awareness. I mean, and we talk about going around right now as like media literacy or whatever, but it's a real thing. You have to, I mean, I know it's just ridiculous, but you have to have that, and reading like a novel like Demian will, if you open yourself to it, it's like I said, it's a little squishy, but if you open yourself to it, it will remind you of these sort of psychological truths that I think probably are going to really benefit like a young person, but even as an adult, going back to it periodically, just remembering. I mean, we're all. I'm not gonna date myself, but I'm not a young man. We're all just kind of, as you age, you accrue kind of barnacles, but fundamentally, you're still that angry 14-year-old kid. There's somewhere inside you, all that stuff comes along and you're dragging it with you. And it's a constant work and it's a constant process. So even though, I wouldn't necessarily say to somebody who's in their 40s, hey, Demian's the first book you should read. It's definitely worth reading. Steppenwolf's probably more for the middle-aged guy, or gal. Because Steppenwolf's about a guy, like literally on page 2, he's thinking about slitting his own throat because he's like, this shit is living is just.
I don't know. These days, 14-year-olds might relate to that more, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I have a teenage daughter right now, and I think about her all the time, and I'm always trying to, kind of protect her and give her like good modeling, and but it's tough out there, man, for sure.
I was talking to another buddy, and I said, I don't know if I ever have a daughter, I don't know, like that's game over. I don't know how to deal with it. I cannot compute how to interact in that way. It's just because it's also just so tough for we are a woman respecter podcast here, obviously, and it's pretty tough out there for young women.
It is. It's tough out there for young women. It's tough out there for young men, because we're these dark wizards that we're battling have their slimy paws, their talons on these levers, and they've told us that they'll shut our society down for a fake disease, and we're all supposed to live with this albatross, hanging on behind us. It's really actually horrific. It's beyond, anything in sci-fi. I mean, it's psychologically torturous what they do to us, and that's what they do. I mean, they feed. You want to talk about Gnostic allegory, right? These are archonic forces that feed off our louche, which is unnecessary human suffering. That's their product: is fear, divisiveness, pain, suffering. I mean, you want the answer to like, how do you raise a girl? And I'm not perfect, and I'm not an expert, but man, I think you got to get them. You got to get people churched. You got to have that antidote, even if you send them to public schools, even if you homeschool. I just think, and I'm biased toward, of course, my church, the church, but I think whatever tradition you come out of, man, like go back to that well and surrender to the fact that you do not. And this is very, very difficult for Americans because we're sort of simultaneously extremely individualistic, but then enmeshed in some sort of hyper neo-socialistic framework. Very unusual, very schizophrenic.
It's like the goth kids in high school. They stand out by dressing the same.
Right. That's profoundly American. And it's human too, but we have this weird schizophrenia where we have this cult of the individual, but then we've also, like our generation, people that, having these conversations now, we've lived through the greatest bait and switch rug pull of all time. I mean, we were raised, colorblind, MLK, and that's just been completely turned on its head. And the civic religion has said, nah, not really. We never really meant that. You're suckers if you believe that. What a strange, turn to live through. In any case, I just think, raising children, there's a reason that the religion exists the way that it does. And I actually think it was Zero who made a tweet saying, he tweeted something to the effect that, like, if your family's Protestant, you should stay Protestant. If your family's Catholic, you should probably stay Catholic. He said, like, because people's evolved along with their religions.
Right,
and I thought a lot about that, man.
Yes.
I mean, if you twisted my arm, I'd say no, all the Protestants should convert and come back to the one true faith. But that's for a different podcast.
I was raised Catholic and I fell away for a long time. And it's funny because I talked to a priest recently. Well, not recently. This is a few years ago now. And I was talking to him and he said, hey, listen, just get into a church. Doesn't even have to be this one. Doesn't even have to be a Catholic church, but you just turn your life around in some way. And that was very good advice for me. I no longer attend. I don't attend a Catholic church. Thinking about it, kind of back and forth. I go to one of those mega churches actually, just because it's near where I live. But asking myself a lot of deep questions about, like, well, why do these traditions exist? To get back to Demian, because this might be the longest aside that I've had yet, which is great because I loved everything that you said. But Demian goes and fights, or not Demian, sorry, Sinclair goes and fights in the First World War, right? Which is like the ultimate, what the hell are we doing here moment for him, right? While also fighting against sort of the forces that, like, trying to individuate and trying to fight against the forces of conformity, let's say, that is German society that eventually led him to fight in this war in the first place, right? So his questioning as a young child about the nature of God, about the divinity of Christ, about this, that, and the other thing, all these things that were taken for granted in German society, built up enough capital in the individual German man that, of course, he would go and sign up to fight in this First World War that would eventually kill him and everyone like him. Very, very, very interesting. I hope I was clear there, because I know I kind of spun in circles there. So tell me if I lost you at all.
No, I mean, I'm following you're kind of describing the subtext of the plot of Demian. Yeah, he ends up going to war. They both end up going to war. It's this unavoidable force that exists outside of them that they have to wrestle with. And then finally they meet again in the hospital, and Demian dies, and that's when Sinclair has the realization that either Demian was a figment of his imagination, or as a character, he was a key to his own daemon, his own alter ego. Yeah. And that's a key tension in the German psyche, and I think the European psyche. Again, the individual versus the collective, and we still carry that with us as I said, in the United States here. It's a very, very schizophrenic way to live. And it makes sense that, art that would resonate with people would speak to this duality, would speak to this kind of two-sidedness or both-sidedness that I think we all feel. I mean, and especially now too, where so many of the people we know and interact with online have alter egos.
They even have other Twitter accounts. They're shit posting accounts. I was thinking, like, you were like, oh, if I ever re-anon, I'm like you don't have a bunch of alts out there.
I had a really spicy alt that I will not name when I was writing my play Moderation, which is a play about, it's really, I mean, it's the second to last play I wrote. It's about social media content moderators losing their minds at work. And if people are interested in it, you can go to moderationplay.com. There's a podcast version of it on Spotify. We may produce it soon, maybe in London, probably in Minnesota, maybe both. So I guess sort of stay tuned. If you're an Art of Darkness person, I'll mention it over there. But when I was researching that play, I made an alt and I went really, really hard into Frog Twitter and got just, this is like a
wait, you're Lomez?
No.
Friend of the show, Lomez.
Friend of the show, Lomez. Yeah, we all know Lomez. No, but yeah, and I was doing it as research. I mean, I was not like nobody's earnestly posting over there. I mean, that's part of the joke, right? It's fun. The memes are incredible. The humor is amazing.
Yes, we're all joking.
Yeah, we're all joking.
Yes, FBI agent. This was all said as in jest.
It is, isn't it?
Of course.
Kevin's either, Kevin, I'm the one guy that's on the left and the right of the curve.
I am squarely at the top of the
midwit curve.
Exactly, because it's the best one. It's the best place to be.
That's the place to be. You got the best view anyway. And then that account finally got killed. I was over in England, and that's when that account got killed. It was very conspicuous. Like, oh, so I'm in a place with different laws, and probably already crossed the line. I remember I went looking for a manifesto. There's some shooter, and I tweeted at somebody, hey, does anybody have a link? And boom, I was done. Yeah, they don't
you got a license for that.
Exactly. Dude, it was very strange. And of course, my main account, I was one of the last casualties before Musk took over. I mean, I used to have just a straight up account under my name, very relatively spicy for a face cuck. I'd post guillotines all through the fake pandemic and everything. I was very upset, very annoyed, still am. I'm one of those guys. And, I got whacked literally like the day Elon was taking over. Somebody special in San Francisco decided that I'd be part of the last shots fired. Yeah. Last shots fired. It was really demoralizing. I'm not going to lie. But I just, I respawned and here I am. And, but that site is such a fucking house of mirrors, man. It's just, so anyway.
I guess the lesson here is become who you always were going to be. What is that? David Foster Wallace. But of course you became who you are always going to be, or something like that. Like his biography by Dave something. They made a movie about it.
Oh yeah, right. I'm not the DFW stan on our pod, although I think that still is our most popular episode. People really, really like that. I don't know why.
I still say playing the whole court. Like I use that in conversation all the time.
Yeah. What a figure. Thinking about Demian too. Like there's a character named Beatrice in the novel, which of course is that's an entire chapter called Beatrice.
Mm-hmm.
He sees a beautiful woman and he calls her Beatrice. That's just pointing directly at Dante, obviously. Which is somebody we covered, and I'm really glad we did because I got to live with the Divine Comedy for a month. It was pretty amazing. I just think people who are looking for something. There's one thing about it reading Hesse that it's very. There's a kind of like a stillness to Hesse. There's a spirituality in his writing, even in Steppenwolf, which is pretty metal and pretty dark. There's like a color, like a vibe of just like, there's gentility in it. That comes from his upbringing and his sort of tortured childhood, his tortured youth, that he was somebody who, like, when you know his background, there was no reason for him to be tortured, except that he was extraordinarily sensitive. Like, his parents were missionaries. They're pietist, so Protestant missionaries, and they lived in India and all the rest of it. And his mother was left behind as her parents went to India, and he just came from this, like, not elite family, but like a real solidly upper middle class family. And there's just something edifying about reading him this novel, like confronting World War I. I mean, our generation, we've had problems, right? And our war is a good friend of mine who's part of my theater company, an actor friend of mine. And we talk at a pretty, high level. I mean, we're trying to make art together, and she'll say, like, our war is psychological. Like, our war is.
You hired Tyler Durden?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's me and Tyler Durden making plays here in the Twin Cities.
I had a post on Substack a few months ago where I queried, because I had this dream, and then I woke up and I said, would I rather live now, or would I rather go over the top at the Somme? And I have every reason in the world to say, no, that's stupid. That's retarded. Like, what are you doing? Of course you would live right now, or you would not face certain death at the Somme. Like, there's, especially everything that I know about the First World War, because this is primarily a literature podcast, but then also it just happens to cover every World War I book ever written for whatever reason. Maybe because I just love it. But everything I've read, everything I know, even like interviews with guys who lived long enough to talk about it, hell on earth, horror. But there's still this thing in the back of my head, like, yeah, I'd probably choose the Somme. And I sound like a crazy person. I sound like a poser. I sound like, somebody who obviously thinks more of himself than I am. And I try not to. I try to be a little bit more, I guess, self-conscious. I guess I try and know myself a little bit more than that. But still, I still would. Like, just the life that we have right now is just so fake, and at least that is reality in some.
You're a bit of a Western Mishima. Somebody
a little bit, yeah. And I think there's a reason why Mishima is so popular in our spheres.
Sure. I mean, and we covered him as well, and I learned a lot. Brad did the episode, so I didn't go as deep as he did, but yeah, what a wild figure. I can say unequivocally that, of course, I wouldn't. I would not trade places. I come from a long line of pacifists and cowards, and peasant farmers. So I'm not going to LARP as somebody who would, take up the rifle. The only thing that I would fight and die for would be, my own community and my family and the church. But much beyond that, certainly not now. I'm not signing up for anything now. And if they start coming for our children, I'll be the first to squirrel them away, to find a way out. I mean, and that happened in living memory. I mean, Vietnam.
Yeah. And that's actually interesting too, because you had a generation pushing. It'd be interesting to see if that ever shook out, because you'd have an older generation trying to squirrel away the young people, trying to keep them away, whereas really the Vietnam thing, you only saw that with senators' sons, or like, you know what I mean? Like, it was very
college kids. People
Exactly.
just signed up to get into college. Yeah, that was what an absolute bit of madness that was. I mean, and I get a little emotional thinking about World War I, because my God, the world that we live in now is the post-apocalyptic, reflection of that world, and it didn't need to happen. And you could ask around scholars and all the rest, and nobody will give you a straight answer. Nobody even knows why it happened. It's just surreal to think that we live 100+ years in the wake of that. And when you think about you talk about going over the top. I mean, World War I, it was like sort of the last aristocratic war. You know, the Oxford and Cambridge lads, you know, were enlisted as or signed up, and they were officers, and they were the ones to go first. You can always watch I mean, maybe you change your mind, T.R. Hudson, if you go watch Paths of Glory.
I'm sure I've seen it. You know, I've really, I know in my mind I know that it's stupid. I know that I'm wrong, but still in the back of my head, like I can convince myself all I want. I can like placate my wife and family who say you're crazy, like shut up. I can say, yeah, I'm just like kind of a goofy guy. I don't actually mean it, but in the back of my mind, if it's 99%, I don't mean it. There's that 1% where it's like, yeah, but it's got to be a little better in some like at least I'd know what I was up against, kind of, you know what I mean? Like there's something about seen enemies or seen threats as opposed to the billion unseen threats around you all the time in modernity.
Why don't you tell me this? Well, and that's true. And modernity and post-modernity they're paranoia generators because of how they interact with human nature, right? We're creatures of flesh and blood and fight or flight, and now we don't know, you know, where's the shot coming from, and so people wound themselves, right, to feel alive. And I mean, that's a feature.
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe this is a mental self-inflicted wound.
And that's very much what Demian's about. I think if you read it, it's sort of that. It's about that in part. Which I got to ask you, if you were to go back to World War I, which direction would you be firing? You know what? You don't have to answer that question.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that's a question that you can ask. It's not. It wasn't really an ideological war, although it really was. It was like the death of monarchy. I'd probably fight on the side of monarchy, just because I've kind of seen democracy. You know, I've seen it kind of, and I think most people, if they had the chance to go back or whatever, or if they were forced to go back in some sort of science fiction story, they'd fight for the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
I think it's a relief, and I hope none of this has been blackpilling. I've said that 2024 would be a year for me of no blackpilling. So even when it starts to feel that way, I always try to find the light. I found myself re-energized and re-enthused this year. I went through kind of a weird time last fall, kind of came out of it here in the new year, and I've sort of sworn to be looking for the light and looking for so we'd say the white pill or the clear pill. And it feels like we're moving into a time of, and this can probably relate back to Demian because of why this novel was so well received when it came out after the war. I mean, it was being read by the survivors of this cataclysm. And it's a novel that's wholly about interiority and coming of age and growing up and becoming a man and trying to make sense of Christianity and make sense of the philosophical underpinnings of a world that would lead to World War I, that would lead to this apocalypse. And once you come, and this is part of the wonderful metaphor of Demian, it's like once you come out on the other side and you survive this crucible of the self, the confrontation with the sort of the dark night of the soul, you confront your demons, you wrestle with your philosophical, angst and both-sidedness, and you finally arrive beyond good and evil, right? This novel is deeply influenced by Nietzsche and that philosophy. It's like all you see is opportunity. And that's how I'm feeling right now, as dark as it is, as like gloves off as COVID was, as menacing as the regime can feel, and as fucking insane as it can be to like doom scroll, you know, as objectively insane as it is that Rolling Stone is calling TD4 as, you know, as good or better than TD1. Like, as insane as that is, everything's so hysterical right now. And so, like I said, gloves off. It does feel like, and this is something that somebody said recently on one podcast or another, that we've returned to real politics now.
Mm.
After a generation or more of just fake politics.
It might have been our friend the Prudentialist.
It might have been crude.
That sounds like something that he would say with a fishing rod in his hand.
And that is a relief. That is a massive relief, because I'm one of these people. I suspected this from my adolescence. I'm a noticer. I'm a systems guy. I notice systems and how they work. Like, I'm mostly a kraut. So I tend to think in Catholic kraut growing up in North Dakota in the 80s and 90s. I think systematically, I think logically. I have a literally training in philosophy and formal logic, right? So and history. So I tend to think in those terms, and had a lot of suspicions, that this was the reality of the world that we're living in. So it's, in so many ways, it's like wonderful that the curtain's been pulled back. It's super liberating.
It does.
It's like they've.
Sorry, it does feel like the scamdemic, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Was like a haymaker, but from an 80-year-old man. So you thought that you saw it coming and you're like, oh, this could hurt. But then it turned out to be sort of weak and impotent, and you were able to keep yourself in some ways. And I mean, a lot of people are super messed up from it still, and probably will continue to be so for whatever years they have left. And I don't mean to downplay what the impact of locking down for so long will have on us for years to come. But it does seem like, hey, the people the noticers are vindicated.
Gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift. Yeah. We're in an era now where it's like, you have to willfully be a normie now. Prior, it was like, well, I watch MTV and I'll go on the beach vacation. I like reality TV and I don't think too deeply. And I liked Obama, but I don't know about his second term. And boy, Trump, he's really out there. But it's now you have to sort of willfully jam yourself into one side or another. And that's what I mean about like politics. We're back in the era now of real politics. Like you can't, there's no more both sidism now. Like we're gonna, there's no more both sidism out of COVID. And it's so telling, again, all the language and all the neuro-linguistic programming and all the media manipulation. It's all front lines. It's the workers on the front lines of the pandemic, and you just go, oh, they're still, and if you spend any time in England, you can see it. I mean, they never left that war. They never left World War II. I mean, we still, according to some of our, some people in this sphere, talk about the Nuremberg regime and everything, and we still live in that reality. But that's starting to fragment, and I just don't know. And it's so the cruelest thing about the COVID business, aside from the immediate, crimes against humanity that occurred, the funerals, keeping people away from their family, locking people away, closing churches, leaving liquor stores open, just literally saying we're a mob. We're a pharmaceutical mobocracy that you live under now. And it breaks on whether
don't forget riots, don't spread COVID.
Hey, listen, right, of course. And I was in New York City when living in Manhattan, found out we were going to have our first child in Manhattan, getting ready to move back to Minneapolis in 2020. We got out of Manhattan in the spring just to land in like Minneapolis, St. Paul to see all that. So that was not the best year. Like for the Kautzman family, that was heavy.
Boy, you must wanted to kill your realtor.
We actually got a good house. We bought when the rates were bottomed out, so we're doing all right. We're doing a lot better now, man. But it's nice to know. It's just like nice to just go, oh, this is what it is. All of my suspicions were true. It is this bad, and they'll do this whenever they want. To get what they want. And we're back to a realm of just politics is about pure power, friend enemy distinction. They're never going to leave you alone. They want your children, and you're in a war for your soul and the souls of your children. And that's why you ought to be reading books like Demian, which are sort of meditations on becoming and retaining the true self against a regime of deception and murder. There you go.
I'm going to let you have the last word there. That was great. Kevin, how can people find you? What are you up to? How can they support you out there in the world?
Oh, thank you.
The 1% out there that aren't bots.
Hey, I'll take the bot support too. Listen, we need all the help we can get. I am the way to find me is at artofdarkpod.com. That is the podcast about the dark side of creativity that I do with Brad Kelly. We do biographical profiles of dead artists, deep dives. We cover literature, music, anybody who is a creative force in their lifetime will cover. I have a theater company. If you want to hear some of my plays, you can go to badmouthtc.com. I'm in the Twin Cities, but I am trying to do theater in London. Might even have some productions in Italy. Just find me at artofdarkpod.com. And then I'm on Twitter at Kautzmania, and it's Kautzmania, Kautzmania.
And if you've listened to all this and you still want to give me money, feel free to. But seriously, the Double Dealer magazine has another issue coming out in March. Feel free to purchase that and our other issues. If you would like to donate to the podcast, we have that set up on our Substack. And if you just enjoy listening, feel free to like, comment, share, tell your friends, all that good stuff, all that shilling stuff. I really appreciate it. I don't know how. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kev.
Let me double down and say, yes, if you're listening to this and you've listened this far and you've listened to a couple of other episodes, support this podcast. And if you can't do it materially with money right now, the least you can do is go give 5 stars. I'm going to do this for Hudson because I know what this is like. Go and give 5 stars on the various platforms. Leave a nice review on iTunes. People put a lot of work and effort into this, and it's sort of the least you can do as somebody who, is getting something for nothing. What were you going to say there?
I was just going to say, I was going to do my little sign off because I don't know how to end podcasts. So I'm just going to end it right